Dominic Vale was a man who owned the city of Boston. He had senators in his pocket and judges on his payroll. At 37, he controlled East Boston with an iron grip that most people never saw coming. The son of a butcher from Southie, they said. The grandson of immigrants who couldn't speak English. Now he sat at the head of an empire built on shadows, and everyone from City Hall to the harbor docks knew his name. But the one thing he didn't have was a clue that his own execution had been scheduled for a Wednesday night inside his own home. He wasn't supposed to be there. Miami was where he belonged tonight. 3 days negotiating with the Colombians in a penthouse suite overlooking the ocean. 3 days of smiling at men who would slit his throat for the right price, pretending they were all civilized businessmen discussing import logistics. 4 hours. That's all it took for everything to collapse. His contact got arrested at dawn. FBI swarmed the warehouse like locusts, and Dominic watched from his hotel room as 20 years of careful relationship building burned to ash on live television. He booked a commercial flight home. No private jet. No bodyguards. No advance warning to anyone. Exhaustion drove him. And something else. A small velvet box in his jacket pocket, containing a diamond choker worth more than most people's houses. Victoria had been distant lately. Cold. Their conversations had become arguments. Their silences had become walls. 3 years together. And he could feel her slipping away. Maybe the diamonds would remind her why she stayed. The November storm had turned Boston into a drowning city. His Mercedes carved through flooded streets, headlights cutting weak paths through the downpour. Beacon Hill rose ahead, and atop it, the Vale estate waited like a crouching beast. He pulled through the gates at 9:15. The house was dark, completely dark. Dominic sat in the parked car for a long moment, engine idling, staring at the black windows. Victoria kept every light blazing until midnight. She had since childhood, some trauma she never explained. The staff knew better than to touch a single switch before she went to bed. So why was the house swallowed by shadows? He killed the engine, stepped into the cold, his breath misted in the November air as he approached the service entrance, moving on instinct now, avoiding the main door. Inside, the smell of the house wrapped around him, furniture polish, fresh flowers, and beneath it all, something that made the hair on his neck stand up. The kitchen was empty, the hallway beyond, silent, no security, no staff. No Victoria rushing down to greet him or complain about his early return. Nothing but darkness and the thundering of his own heartbeat. His hand found the Beretta under his jacket. 20 years had taught him what this kind of silence meant. It meant someone was waiting. It meant someone had planned. He moved through the shadows toward the grand staircase, and stopped. A figure stood in the darkness ahead. Dominic drew his weapon in one fluid motion, finger on the trigger, ready to fire. The figure stepped into a sliver of moonlight. Elena, the housekeeper, 28 years old, quiet as a ghost, employed for 2 years. She stood trembling in her black uniform, eyes wide with terror, clutching a cleaning cloth like it could protect her from what was coming. Dominic lowered the gun slightly. Elena, what the hell is going on? Where is everyone? She didn't answer. Instead, she lunged forward, grabbed the lapel of his expensive jacket, and pulled him into the alcove beneath the stairs. Her hand clamped over his mouth before he could protest. Then she leaned close. Her breath was warm against his ear. Her body was shaking violently, and she whispered 2 words that would save his life. Stay silent. Dominic's first instinct was to shove her away. No one touched him without permission. Not his men, not his lovers, not anyone. He was Dominic Vale, and the last person who grabbed him uninvited had lost 3 fingers for the offense. But something in Elena's eyes stopped him. Raw terror. The kind that couldn't be faked. He had seen that look before. In the eyes of men who knew they were about to die. In the faces of witnesses who had seen too much. Elena wore that expression now. Her pupils blown wide in the darkness. Her entire body vibrating with fear. Let go of me, Dominic whispered, his voice dangerous. Elena shook her head frantically. Her grip on his jacket tightened instead of loosening. She pulled him deeper into the alcove beneath the grand staircase. Into shadows so thick he could barely see her face. 2 years. She had worked for him for 2 years. He tried to remember the last time he had actually looked at her. Really looked. She was always there, always working, always invisible. She brought coffee in the mornings and fresh towels in the evenings. She moved through his house like a ghost, never speaking unless spoken to, never drawing attention. He couldn't even remember her last name. Mr. Vale, Elena breathed, her voice barely audible. Please. You have to listen. I don't have to do anything. But he kept his voice low. Some part of him, the part that had survived 20 years in this business, was already listening. Tell me what's happening. Where is my security team? Where is Victoria? Elena flinched at the name. That small reaction sent ice down Dominic's spine. Why? He whispered, his gun still raised, ready. Why should I stay silent in my own house? Elena's eyes filled with tears, not the theatrical kind that Victoria produced on demand. These were real. These were the tears of someone staring into an abyss. Because, Mr. Vale, she breathed, they are celebrating your funeral up there. The words hit him like a bullet to the chest. Funeral. His funeral. They thought he was dead. The feeling crashed over him like a wave of ice water. He recognized it instantly. The same sensation he'd felt in 2019, walking into a warehouse in Dorchester, 30 seconds before the ambush that had killed 4 of his men. His body had known before his mind caught up. His instincts had screamed at him to run. They were screaming now. He looked up at the ceiling. Toward the master bedroom on the 2nd floor, the silence suddenly made sense. Not peaceful, not empty. This was the silence of a trap already sprung. The silence of predators waiting in the dark. Dominic moved toward the stairs. Elena grabbed his wrist. Hard. No. She shook her head violently. Not yet. She pointed to her ear, then pointed upward. Listen first. Every muscle in his body wanted to storm up those stairs and demand answers. He was Dominic Vale. This was his house, his empire. No one celebrated his death while he still drew breath. But the girl's terror was genuine, and his instincts had never failed him. Slowly, Dominic holstered his weapon. He bent down and removed his Italian leather shoes, setting them silently on the marble floor. In his socks, he would be a ghost. Elena watched him with something like relief. He moved toward the staircase, staying close to the wall where the wood was strongest, least likely to creak. Each step was deliberate, each breath controlled. Halfway up, he saw it, golden light spilling from beneath the master bedroom door. Faint, warm, the only light in the entire house. And then he heard it. Victoria's laugh, but not the laugh he knew, not the sharp, brittle sound she made when she was annoyed, or the forced giggle she used at parties. This was different, throaty, intimate, satisfied. The laugh of a woman with a secret, the laugh of a woman who thought she had already won. Dominic pressed his back against the silk wallpaper, inches from the bedroom door. The golden light cut a thin line across the hallway carpet. Through the gap, he could see shadows moving. 2 figures, close together. Victoria's voice drifted out, smooth and calculating, nothing like the shrill tone she used when arguing with him about dinner plans or his late nights at the office. This was a different woman entirely, confident, cold, in control. The plane should have landed in Miami by now. If he checks in at the hotel and doesn't answer his usual contacts, someone will notice. A man's voice responded. Deep, familiar. Dominic's blood turned to ice. Relax, V. The pilot is mine. Has been for 2 years. The manifest shows Dominic Vale disembarked in Miami at 6:15. Customs records confirm it. Hotel records will show he checked in at 7. Ryan Mercer, his underboss, his right hand, the man he had trusted with his life for 6 years. And the actual Dominic? Victoria asked. Ice clinked against crystal. They were drinking, celebrating, currently bleeding out in the cargo hold at 35,000 feet. Ryan's voice dripped with satisfaction. The pressure seal I rigged on the private jet will malfunction somewhere over the Atlantic. Explosive decompression. Nothing left but red mist and scattered debris. They won't find enough of him to fill a shoebox. Dominic stopped breathing. The private jet. The mechanical issue that had grounded his flight this morning. Ryan had called personally to deliver the news, apologizing profusely, promising the problem would be fixed by tomorrow. Dominic had cursed the inconvenience and booked a commercial flight instead. That inconvenience had saved his life. What about the estate? Victoria asked. More ice clinking, more liquid pouring. Dominic recognized the sound. His 25-year Macallan, the bottle he saved for anniversaries. The accounts, the offshore holdings, already handled. Sullivan at the law firm is ours. The power of attorney documents were filed last week. Once Dominic is declared missing, you become executor. We liquidate everything, blame it on the Castellano family, and let the war sort out the rest. Victoria laughed. That new laugh, the one Dominic didn't recognize. God, I've been waiting for this. 3 years of playing the dutiful girlfriend. 3 years of listening to him talk about legacy and empire while treating me like a decorative vase. You won't be decoration anymore, V. You'll be the queen. Silence. The wet sound of a kiss. Dominic's grip tightened on his gun until his knuckles ached. The rage was building now, hot and blinding, demanding release. Then Ryan spoke again, softer, almost reverent. I've waited 15 years for this night, V. 15 years since his father killed mine in that warehouse on the docks. 15 years building this identity, building his trust, making myself indispensable. The words hit Dominic like a sledgehammer. Anthony Mercer. The name surfaced from the depths of his memory. 2009. His father had executed a traitor in a warehouse in Southie. Shot him while his teenage son watched through a window. Ryan was that son. Ryan had changed his name, his face, his entire identity. And he had spent 15 years waiting for this moment. The Vale bloodline ends tonight, Ryan continued. His father, him, everything they built, gone. Red flooded Dominic's vision. He reached for the door handle. A small hand clamped around his wrist. Elena. She had followed him up the stairs, silent as smoke. Her eyes were wide, pleading, terrified. She shook her head. Not yet. Dominic yanked his wrist free from Elena's grip. 15 years. Ryan had spent 15 years pretending, smiling, serving, waiting. And Victoria, the woman who slept beside him every night, had been counting down the days until his corpse was cold. He would kill them both, right now, kick down that door and put bullets through their skulls before they could finish their champagne toast. Elena grabbed him again, harder this time. Before he could shove her away, she thrust her phone into his face. The screen glowed in the darkness, showing a grid of security camera feeds, the house's entire surveillance system, live and streaming. Dominic's rage froze mid-breath. The footage showed men, dozens of them, black tactical gear, red armbands on their left biceps. They surrounded the estate like a noose, moving through the gardens, positioning at every exit. He recognized the armbands instantly. Castellano. Salvatore Castellano's private army. Ryan made a deal, Elena whispered, her lips nearly touching his ear. After your plane went down, Castellano's men would clean the house. No witnesses, no loose ends. She swiped to another camera, the front entrance. 2 men with assault rifles were already inside, sweeping the foyer. Dominic's mind raced through the calculations. 1 Beretta, 15 rounds, against 20-plus armed soldiers. He could kill Ryan and Victoria right now. The satisfaction would last approximately 3 seconds. Then Castellano's men would swarm the stairs and cut him to pieces. He would die, and they would win. The bedroom door remained cracked open. Victoria's voice floated through. What about the housekeeper? Elena saw me let Ryan in through the service door earlier. Dominic felt Elena stiffen beside him. She's a ghost anyway, Ryan replied, dismissive. No family, no friends, no one who would miss her. After we're done celebrating, I'll take her for a drive. Somewhere quiet. She won't come back. Victoria laughed. Make it clean. I just had the carpets redone. Dominic turned to look at Elena. She stood motionless in the shadows. Her face had changed. The terror was still there, buried deep, but something else had risen to the surface. Something cold and sharp. They were going to murder her. A 28-year-old woman whose only crime was being in the wrong place at the wrong time. They would kill her and dump her body somewhere no one would ever look. And Victoria was worried about the carpets. Elena met his gaze. She pointed toward the end of the hallway, past the guest rooms, toward a door he barely remembered existed. The linen closet. There's a way out, she whispered. A passage they don't know exists. But we have to go now. Below them, heavy footsteps echoed on the marble floors. Castellano's men were moving through the ground level, room by room. Dominic looked at the bedroom door one last time. Ryan's laughter joined Victoria's. The clink of glasses, a toast to his death. He memorized every sound, the pitch of their voices, the rhythm of their celebration, the casual cruelty in their words. He would use it as fuel later. Lead the way, Dominic said. Elena didn't hesitate. She turned and moved down the hallway like a shadow, her bare feet silent on the carpet. Dominic followed the housekeeper into the darkness. The linen closet smelled like lavender and Egyptian cotton. Elena pushed aside stacks of pristine white sheets, her movements quick and precise. Behind the shelves, her fingers found something in the wooden panel. She pressed. Click. A section of the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow passage that exhaled cold, stale air. Darkness pooled beyond like black water. Dominic stared. I built this house. I know every inch of it. You renovated it, Elena corrected softly. The original owner, Mr. Blackwood, was a bootlegger during Prohibition. He built passages throughout the estate for moving product. This one leads to the old coal cellar that was sealed in the 40s. And you know this how? I found the original blueprints in the library, behind a collection of first edition Hemingways that no one has touched in decades. Dominic's eyebrow raised despite the circumstances. You memorize architectural plans while dusting? I read everything, Mr. Vale. Her eyes met his in the darkness. It's how I survive. Heavy boots thundered on the staircase below them. Voices barked orders in clipped Italian. Castellano's men were moving to the second floor. Elena slipped through the opening. Dominic followed, his shoulders scraping against the narrow walls. She pulled the panel shut behind them just as flashlight beams swept across the hallway outside. Total darkness swallowed them whole. Elena clicked on a small penlight, shielding most of the beam with her palm. The weak glow revealed a rusted iron ladder descending into nothing. 30 feet down, she whispered. Then the tunnel. She went first, moving with surprising confidence. Dominic followed, each rung groaning under his weight. The air grew colder as they descended. Damper. The smell of old brick and forgotten decades filled his lungs. His ribs ached from tension. His hands were slick with sweat. Above them, muffled shouts echoed through the walls. They were searching the rooms now. It wouldn't take long before someone noticed the master of the house was neither dead in Miami nor hiding under a bed. His feet hit solid ground. Elena's penlight revealed a brick tunnel stretching into darkness. Cobwebs hung like funeral shrouds. Water dripped somewhere in the distance. This connects to the drainage system near Beacon Creek, Elena said, already moving. Half a mile out. My car is parked on the service road past the property line. Dominic grabbed her arm, stopping her. Why? She turned. Why what? Why are you helping me? His voice was harder than he intended. You heard them up there. They want you dead anyway. You could have run while I was listening at that door. Disappeared into the night. Why risk coming back for me? Elena was silent for a long moment. The penlight cast deep shadows across her face, making her look older, harder, like someone who had seen things that left permanent marks. Because 5 years ago, Mr. Vale, you saved my life. Dominic frowned. I don't know what you're talking about. A warehouse in Southie. You raided it looking for stolen cargo from the harbor. Instead, you found 12 girls locked in shipping containers. We'd been there for 6 months, moved from city to city like livestock. The memory surfaced slowly. A tip about hijacked goods, his men cutting through padlocks, the smell that hit them when the container doors opened, and the faces inside, hollow, broken, barely human anymore. I was one of them, Elena continued. I was the weakest, the one they said wouldn't survive another week. But you looked at me, actually looked, and you said 3 words I'll never forget. She stepped closer. Get them out. Dominic remembered now, vaguely, one of dozens of operations that year. He hadn't thought about it since, but Elena had thought about it every day for 5 years. I spent years finding you, she said, getting close, waiting for a chance to repay the debt. She turned back toward the tunnel. Now we're even. Move. They ran through the tunnel like ghosts fleeing purgatory. Stagnant water splashed beneath their feet, the brick walls pressed close, forcing them to move single file. Elena led the way, her small penlight cutting a weak path through decades of accumulated darkness. After what felt like an eternity, moonlight appeared ahead, a pale circle growing larger with each step. Elena killed the light and held up her hand. Stop! They approached the exit slowly. The tunnel opened into a drainage pipe that emptied near Beacon Creek. Elena crawled out first, then reached back to help Dominic through the narrow opening. Cold mud swallowed them both. They lay flat against the wet earth, barely breathing. Above the tree line, a buzzing sound grew louder. A drone swept overhead, its thermal camera scanning the darkness below. Ryan is thorough, Dominic muttered. His real name is Ryan, Elena whispered back. And yes, he planned for everything, except you taking a commercial flight. The drone passed. They waited 30 seconds, then another 30. Elena moved first, crawling through the underbrush toward the tree line. Dominic followed, his Armani suit now unrecognizable beneath layers of mud and torn fabric. His Italian leather shoes squelched with each movement. The rain had stopped, but the November wind cut through his wet clothes like frozen razors. He could see Elena shivering ahead of him, her black uniform soaked through, her hair wild around her face. But she kept moving, steady, determined. 10 minutes of brutal terrain. Thorns tore at their arms. Branches whipped their faces. The ground alternated between slick mud and treacherous roots. Finally, they emerged onto an old service road. A silver Honda Civic sat beneath a canopy of bare oaks. 2016 model. Dented bumper. Rust spots on the wheel wells. Dominic stared. "This is your car?" The security chief said staff vehicles were eyesores. Elena was already fumbling with her keys. "He made us park off property. Half a mile walk each way." Her hands shook violently. The adrenaline crash was hitting her now. The keys slipped from her fingers and disappeared into the wet leaves. Dominic bent down and retrieved them. "I'll drive." Elena snatched them back. "No, the starter is tricky. You have to wiggle the key a certain way or it won't catch." She unlocked the door. They dove inside, both gasping from exertion. The car smelled like vanilla air freshener and old coffee. Elena jammed the key into the ignition, wiggled, turned. The engine coughed, sputtered, died. "Come on," she breathed. Come on. Headlights appeared around the bend behind them. 3 black SUVs, moving fast. Elena tried again. Cough, sputter. The SUVs were closing. 200 yards. "Elena," Dominic warned. "I know. 100 yards." She cranked the key one more time, pumping the gas pedal with desperate force. The engine roared to life. Elena slammed the car into drive and floored it. The little Civic's tires screamed against the wet asphalt as they shot forward onto the main road. High beams exploded in the rearview mirror. The SUVs were right behind them. Bullets pinged off the rear bumper. One punched through the back windshield, spraying glass across the interior. Elena screamed but kept her foot pinned to the floor. The Civic whined in protest as the speedometer climbed past 85. "Where are we going?" Elena yelled over the wind howling through the shattered window. Dominic checked his Beretta. 1 magazine, 15 rounds, against 3 vehicles full of armed soldiers. "We can't go to my people. I don't know who else Ryan has turned." He looked at Elena. "But I know one man he couldn't touch." "Who?" "Marcus Thorne. My brother from another mother." Dominic's jaw tightened. "And the one man who wants Castellano dead more than I do." Elena drove like she had been born behind a wheel. The Civic screamed through the Boston streets, tires barely gripping the wet pavement. Behind them, the 3 SUVs pursued relentlessly, their headlights cutting through the darkness like hunting dogs on a scent. She yanked the wheel hard at the next exit. The little car drifted sideways, barely missing the guardrail. One of the SUVs wasn't as lucky. Metal shrieked against metal as it clipped the barrier and spun out. 2 left. Elena plunged into the maze of narrow streets in Dorchester. Left turn, right turn, through an alley barely wide enough for the Civic's mirrors. The SUVs fell back, unable to navigate the tight spaces. Then the temperature gauge spiked into the red. "We're overheating," Elena said, her voice tight. "One of those bullets must have hit the radiator." Steam began pouring from beneath the hood. The engine coughed, stuttered, and died as Elena guided the car into a dark alley behind a row of abandoned warehouses. Silence, except for the ticking of the dying engine and their ragged breathing. "Give me your phone," Dominic said. Elena pulled a cheap burner from her apron pocket. "I always carry one. Old habit." Dominic dialed a number he had memorized 20 years ago. It rang 3 times. "Speak." The voice was gravel and whiskey. "Marcus. Don't hang up. It's Dom." Silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. Then, "You're supposed to be dead. The news just broke. Your plane went down over the Atlantic. No survivors. The news is wrong. I'm bleeding. I'm tired. And I'm standing in an alley with the only person in Boston I can trust who isn't you." Another pause. "Where?" "Dorchester. Behind the old fish processing plant on Harbor Street. 20 minutes. Don't move." The line went dead. 18 minutes later, a convoy of black sedans rolled into the alley. Marcus Thorne stepped out of the lead vehicle, flanked by 10 armed men. At 42, he still moved like the street fighter he had been as a teenager. Same block as Dominic, same hunger, same scars. He looked at Dominic's ruined suit, his mud-caked face, his bloodshot eyes. Then his gaze shifted to Elena, small and filthy in her torn uniform. "Who's the girl? The reason I'm still breathing." Marcus raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. "Get in. We'll talk at the warehouse." The safe house was an abandoned shipping warehouse on the South Boston waterfront. Marcus's territory, his fortress. Inside, Dominic told him everything. Ryan's betrayal, Victoria's treachery, the 15-year revenge plot, Castellano's army surrounding the estate. Marcus listened without interrupting. When Dominic finished, his face was carved from stone. "Mercer's boy. I always felt something off about that snake." He shook his head slowly. "You're telling me he's been playing the long game for 15 years? And now he has Castellano's army backing him, plus whoever he's turned inside my organization." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. A cold, predatory smile. I've been waiting years for a chance at Castellano. He took my brother 8 years ago, shot him in the street like a dog. His eyes hardened. If we move together, I can mobilize my people within 24 hours. But this isn't charity, Dom. I want South Docks after this. All of it. Half of Dominic's waterfront territory. A massive price. Done, Dominic said without hesitation. Marcus nodded. Then let's plan a resurrection. From the corner of the room, Elena watched in silence. Her trembling had stopped. Her eyes had changed, sharp now, calculating, absorbing every word, every detail, every name. Marcus leaned close to Dominic and whispered, "That one's dangerous." Dominic looked at Elena. She met his gaze without flinching. "Good, dangerous," Marcus added. The warehouse transformed into a war room within hours. Maps of Boston covered every surface. Marcus's men had marked positions, routes, safe zones in red and blue ink. Intelligence reports piled up on a makeshift table constructed from shipping crates. Marcus paced before the largest map, his finger tracing the boundaries of Castellano territory. My sources say he's got about 60 soldiers total, but they're spread thin, half guarding his properties in West Boston, the rest running operations across the city. "And Ryan?" Dominic asked. "Sitting in your house like he owns it. Which, I suppose, he thinks he does." Marcus spat on the concrete floor. "He's got maybe 20 Castellano men with him, plus whatever remains of your security team that he's turned." Dominic's jaw tightened. His house, his empire, being carved up by vultures before his body was even cold. "We need to move fast," Marcus continued, "before they consolidate. Before they tomorrow night." Both men turned. Elena stood in the corner, still wearing her mud-stained uniform. She hadn't spoken since they arrived. Most of Marcus's men had forgotten she was there. "Tomorrow night," she repeated, stepping forward. "Victoria will hold a memorial service for Mr. Vale. She loves attention. She won't be able to resist putting on a show for the whole city." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "The housekeeper knows social protocol? I know everything that happens in that house, Mr. Thorne, including the fact that Victoria ordered white lilies for the service this morning." Elena's eyes flicked to Dominic. "Mr. Vale hates white lilies. She's already redecorating his funeral." Dominic felt something twist in his chest. 3 years together, and Victoria didn't know his preferences for flowers. But the housekeeper did. Elena continued. "She'll invite the press, the politicians, the other families. It's expected. And she'll have to invite you, Mr. Thorne. Refusing would raise suspicions." Marcus nodded slowly. "So I walk in the front door, with a gift for the grieving widow, a portrait of Mr. Vale, something large enough to carry equipment inside." Elena was already sketching on a piece of paper. The floor plan of the Vale estate, drawn entirely from memory. Portable spotlight, battery backup, hidden inside the frame. "And how do we disable their security?" "I'll do it." Elena marked the security room on her sketch. "The catering company for the service is external. I know the manager. I can get in with the staff." Dominic stepped forward. "Absolutely not. If Ryan sees you, Ryan never saw me, Mr. Vale." Elena's voice was steady. "Not once in 2 years. I brought him coffee every morning. I cleaned his office. I ironed his shirts." She met Dominic's eyes without flinching. "To him, I'm furniture. That's my advantage." The room fell silent. Marcus studied Elena with new appreciation. "She thinks like an operator, not a maid." Elena returned to her sketch, marking camera positions, exit points, guard rotations. Her hand moved with confident precision. "There's something else," she said. "Ryan has a tell. When he's nervous, he touches his left cufflink. It belonged to his father, the only thing he kept from his old identity." She looked up. "If he touches it during the memorial, he's scared. That's when you strike." Dominic stared at her. "How do you know about the cufflink?" "I iron his shirts, Mr. Vale." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "I know the weight of every item in his pockets." Marcus let out a low whistle. "Damn, where did you find this one?" Dominic didn't answer. He was too busy looking at Elena as though seeing her for the very first time. The warehouse fell quiet after midnight. Marcus's men moved through the shadows, checking weapons, running final equipment tests. The soft click of magazines being loaded punctuated the silence. Tomorrow would bring blood. Everyone knew it. Dominic sat alone by a grimy window overlooking the harbor. The Boston skyline glittered in the distance, beautiful and treacherous. Somewhere out there, Ryan Mercer was sleeping in his bed. Victoria was trying on black dresses for the funeral. His funeral. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard their laughter echoing through that bedroom door. Footsteps approached. Soft, Familiar. Elena appeared beside him, holding 2 chipped mugs. Steam curled up from the dark liquid inside. "I found instant coffee in the break room," she said. "It's terrible, but it's hot." She handed him a mug. Their fingers brushed in the exchange. Dominic took a sip. She was right. It was terrible, but it was exactly what he needed. 2 years, he said quietly. "You've been bringing me coffee for 2 years. I never once asked how you took yours. Black, no sugar." Elena wrapped her hands around her own mug. "But you wouldn't know that. You never saw me drink it." The words weren't accusatory, just honest. Dominic stared out at the harbor. 5 years. You spent 5 years getting close to me, just to repay a debt? Elena was silent for a long moment. "It wasn't a debt," she said finally. "It was a purpose." She sat down on a crate beside him, close enough that he could smell the remnants of lavender beneath the mud and sweat. "After that warehouse, I had nothing. No family, no identity. The organization that took me had erased everything. My documents, my records, my existence." She took a breath. "I was 23 when they grabbed me, walking home from a night class at Boston College. My family thought I ran away. They stopped looking after 6 months. Dominic said nothing. He let her speak. 6 months in that container, moving from city to city. I watched girls disappear, sold, traded, broken." Her voice didn't waver, but her hands tightened around the mug. "I was the weakest one left. They said I wouldn't survive another week. And then you came." She looked at him. "You didn't just unlock the container, Mr. Vale. You looked at us. Most men look through people like me. We're invisible. But you looked directly at me and said, 'You're safe now.'" Her eyes glistened. "No one had said that to me in 6 months. Dominic searched his memory. He remembered the raid, the smell, the horror. But her face among the others had faded into a blur of hollow eyes and skeletal frames. "I don't remember you specifically," he admitted. "There were so many. I know. That's what made it real. You weren't saving me for credit. You weren't performing. You just did it because it was right." Silence stretched between them, comfortable, heavy with things unspoken. "I spent 20 years building an empire," Dominic said quietly. "And the 2 people closest to me were counting the days until my grave." Elena turned to face him fully. "Not everyone," she said. She reached out and placed the coffee more firmly in his grip, her fingers pressing against his. "Some of us were counting the days we could prove our loyalty." Their eyes met. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Dominic didn't feel alone, not surrounded by soldiers or politicians or business partners, but genuinely seen. Elena withdrew her hand and stood. "You should try to rest. Tomorrow will be long." She walked back to her corner of the warehouse, wrapped herself in a thin blanket, and sat with her back against the wall. She didn't sleep either. They waited for dawn together, apart yet somehow connected by the silence between them. The Vale estate had been transformed into a monument of grief. Black silk draped every window, black ribbons adorned the iron gates, and white lilies filled every room, their sickly sweet fragrance hanging heavy in the November air. News vans lined the street outside. Their satellite dishes pointed at the gray sky like mechanical flowers seeking sun. Reporters practiced their solemn expressions while cameramen jockeyed for the best angles. Inside, the great hall overflowed with mourners. Politicians who had taken Dominic's money, judges who had ruled in his favor, business partners who feared him, rivals who pretended to respect him, all dressed in black, all murmuring condolences, all secretly calculating what his death meant for their own fortunes. Victoria stood on the small stage near the grand staircase, a vision of elegant sorrow. Her black Valentino dress hugged her figure perfectly. A delicate lace veil obscured her dry eyes. She dabbed at them occasionally with a monogrammed handkerchief, accepting embraces and whispered sympathies with practiced grace. The grieving widow, the role of a lifetime. Ryan Mercer stood 3 steps behind her, playing the loyal friend, the supportive right hand. His black suit was impeccable, his expression appropriately somber. Only the occasional touch to his left cufflink betrayed any nervousness. In the kitchen, controlled chaos reigned. Elena slipped through the service entrance wearing a borrowed catering uniform, white shirt, black vest, hair pinned back in a severe bun. Her eyes stayed down, her movements efficient and invisible. No one gave her a second glance. She picked up a tray of champagne flutes and moved into the crowd, weaving between mourners with practiced ease. 2 years of invisibility had prepared her for this moment. The front doors opened with ceremony. Marcus Thorne entered, dressed in an old-fashioned black suit and flat cap. 4 of his men followed, carrying a large object draped in burgundy velvet. A portrait, Marcus announced, his voice carrying across the hall, commissioned in memory of Dominic Vale. I thought it fitting to display during the service. Victoria's smile flickered for just a moment. Ryan's hand moved to his cufflink. How generous, Mr. Thorne, Victoria said smoothly. Please, place it on the stage. The covered portrait was positioned on an easel beside the podium. No one questioned its unusual bulk. No one thought to look inside the frame. Elena set down her empty tray and moved toward the library. The security room was just beyond, through a door marked private. The code hadn't changed. 7419. She had watched the guards enter it hundreds of times. They never noticed the housekeeper watching. The door clicked open. Inside, monitors displayed every corner of the estate, the Great Hall, the entrances, the perimeter. The room was empty. Every guard was on the floor, watching the performance. Elena sat at the console and began typing commands. System override, generator bypass, emergency lockdown protocols. On the center monitor, Victoria approached the microphone. The crowd hushed. Thank you all for coming, Victoria began, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. Dominic was a complicated man, but he was my love, my world, and now, Elena's finger hovered over the execute button. On another monitor, she spotted movement at the service entrance, a figure in torn clothes and muddy shoes, standing in the shadows, waiting. Ryan touched his cufflink again, twice in 30 seconds. He was terrified. Victoria continued her eulogy, dabbing at her eyes, speaking of love and loss and legacy. Lies wrapped in silk and perfume. Elena watched Dominic's silhouette on the monitor. Ready when you are, Mr. Vale, she whispered to herself, and pressed the button. My husband, Dominic. He was a complicated man. Victoria's voice trembled beautifully through the microphone. Every eye in the room was fixed on her performance, but he loved this city. He loved building things. He loved creating a legacy that would outlast us all. And though he's gone, click. Every light in the mansion died at once. Darkness swallowed the great hall. Gasps erupted from the crowd. A woman screamed. Glass shattered somewhere as a champagne flute hit the marble floor. Stay calm, Ryan's voice cut through the chaos. It's just a fuse. Everyone stay where you are. But the backup generators didn't kick in. The emergency lights didn't flicker to life. The darkness remained absolute. Then a single spotlight blazed to life. It didn't come from the house's system. It came from inside the velvet-draped portrait on the stage. Marcus's gift. The battery-powered rig hidden within the frame. The beam cut through the darkness and landed at the top of the grand staircase. Dominic Vale stood there, not in his usual Armani, not polished and powerful. He wore the same clothes from 2 nights ago, torn, muddy, stained with sweat and blood. A bandage wrapped around his head, where a branch had cut him during the escape. He looked like a corpse that had clawed its way out of the grave. A wireless microphone was in one hand, a small remote control in the other. Hello, darling. His voice boomed through the PA system, echoing off the walls. You started the funeral without the guest of honor. Victoria's face went white. Her mouth opened, but no sound emerged. The handkerchief fell from her frozen fingers. Ryan's hand flew to his holster. He drew his weapon, aiming at the figure on the stairs. A dozen red laser dots appeared on his chest. Marcus's men had positioned themselves throughout the hall during the blackout. They stood in doorways, behind pillars, along the balcony. Every gun pointed at Ryan. I wouldn't, Dominic said calmly, descending the stairs one step at a time, unless you want to find out exactly how many of my bullets have your name on them. Ryan's gun wavered. Ryan, Dominic's voice dropped to something cold and intimate. You told my woman I was at the bottom of the Atlantic, scattered across the ocean like red mist. He reached the middle of the staircase. You were half right. The old Dominic is dead. He died the moment he heard his best friend planning his murder with his lover. He reached the bottom step. And you, Victoria. He turned to face her. You wanted this house so badly. You can have it. As a coffin. Victoria crumpled to her knees. Dominic, please. He forced me. I didn't know what he was planning. He threatened me. You can't do this, Ryan shouted, desperation cracking his voice. Castellano's men are surrounding this place. You're outnumbered. Dominic smiled, cold, predatory. Your men work for money, Ryan. I just tripled their salary via text message. He glanced toward the windows. Funny how quickly loyalty shifts when the paycheck does. Outside, the red armbands were dropping. Castellano's mercenaries lowered their weapons and stepped back from the property. The ones inside did the same. Ryan stood alone in the center of the hall, abandoned by his army, exposed before the entire city. "Save it," Dominic said to Victoria's continued sobbing. "Elena told me everything." Victoria's crying stopped abruptly. "Elena?" She looked up, mascara streaking her cheeks. "The housekeeper?" The security room door opened. Elena stepped into the light. She still wore the catering uniform. Her hair was still pinned back. But something had changed. Her posture, her presence, the way she held herself. No longer invisible. No longer furniture. "That's right," Elena said quietly. "The one who knew all your secrets." Panic erupted. The mayor was the first to flee, shoving past a senator in his desperation to reach the exit. Politicians trampled over each other. Judges abandoned all dignity. The cream of Boston society scattered like roaches when the lights came on. But the reporters stayed, cameras still rolling, recording the scandal of the decade. Within minutes, the great hall had emptied of everyone except those who mattered. Dominic, Elena, Marcus and his men, and the two traitors surrounded by red laser dots. Dominic walked slowly toward Ryan, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. 15 years, he said. "You spent 15 years pretending, smiling at me, eating at my table, learning my secrets." He stopped 3 feet away. "That takes dedication." Ryan's chin lifted defiantly, despite the dozen guns aimed at his heart. "Your father murdered mine in cold blood, shot him in that warehouse while he begged for his life, begged for mercy." His voice cracked. "I was 14. I watched through the window. I saw everything." Dominic was quiet for a long moment. "My father was a monster," he said finally. "He did monstrous things, things I spent 20 years trying to undo." He met Ryan's eyes. "But I'm not him. If you had come to me, told me the truth, I would have heard you out." "Heard me out?" Ryan laughed, bitter and broken. "Your kind doesn't hear. You take. You destroy. And then you pretend you're better than the men who came before you." Dominic's jaw tightened. Marcus stepped forward, his old-school flat cap casting shadows across his face. "He tried to frame me," Marcus said. "Told Castellano he'd use my roots to move product once you were gone. Tried to start a war with my name on it." His eyes were cold. "I want him." Dominic looked at Ryan one last time. 15 years of false friendship. 15 years of lies. "He's yours. Do what you will." 2 of Marcus's men grabbed Ryan's arms. He struggled, screaming curses as they dragged him toward the service entrance. "This isn't over, Vale. You hear me?" "This isn't." The door slammed shut. Silence returned. Victoria remained on her knees, mascara rivers staining her cheeks. She reached for Dominic's hand as he approached. "Please," she whispered. "It was a mistake. I was confused. He manipulated me. You knew enough to celebrate my death with my scotch." Dominic reached into his jacket and pulled out the velvet box. The diamond choker caught the spotlight's beam, glittering like frozen tears. Victoria's eyes lit up despite everything. Instinct, greed, the reflexes of a woman who measured love in carats. Dominic snapped the box shut with a click that sounded like a gunshot. "This was for you. I bought it in Miami. I was going to fix us." He turned and walked to Elena, took her hand, placed the velvet box in her palm. What Victoria's voice rose to a shriek. "You're giving it to the maid?" "She's not the maid." Dominic looked at Elena. She stood frozen, the box heavy in her hand, her eyes wide with disbelief. "She's the woman who saved my life while you were planning my funeral." Victoria screamed as Marcus's men lifted her to her feet. "Escort her out," Dominic ordered. "No car, no jewelry, no coat. She leaves with exactly what she brought to this relationship." They dragged her toward the front door. Outside, rain had begun to fall. "You can't do this," Victoria shrieked. "I'll tell everyone. The press. The police." Dominic didn't turn around. "You have your life. That's more than you left for me." The door opened. Cold rain swept in, and Victoria was pushed out into the night. The hall fell silent. Dominic stood amid the wreckage of his memorial service. Broken glass, overturned chairs. White lilies scattered across the floor like fallen snow. Elena moved to his side, still clutching the velvet box. Marcus approached, his expression grim. "We have a problem, Dom." Dominic turned. "Castellano wasn't here tonight. He's still out there." Marcus's jaw tightened. "And now he knows you're alive." 2 days after the memorial, Dominic was rebuilding his empire from the ashes. The betrayal ran deeper than Ryan alone. 3 captains had been compromised, 2 accountants, a dozen soldiers who had shifted their loyalty for Castellano's money. One by one, Dominic rooted them out. Some fled before he could find them. Others weren't so lucky. Trust had to be rebuilt. Alliances reinforced. The Vale organization had been wounded, and wounded predators attracted scavengers. Elena remained at Marcus's safe house. The estate wasn't secure yet. Too many unknown variables, too many potential threats. Dominic told himself it was strategic, keeping a valuable asset protected. He didn't examine why her safety felt more important than his own. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. Silence on the other end. Heavy breathing. Then a voice he recognized instantly. Old, cultured, venomous. Mr. Vale. Congratulations on your resurrection. Very dramatic. Salvatore Castellano. The snake himself. Castellano. Dominic kept his voice flat. I was wondering when you'd call. I'm a patient man. Unlike Ryan, who was useful, but ultimately expendable. A pause, the sound of ice clinking against crystal. You understand business, Vale. What I don't understand is why 20 of my men never returned from your little party. They're sleeping. Permanently. Dominic's grip tightened on the phone. You shouldn't have sent them into my house. Castellano chuckled. A dry, papery sound. Bold. I respect that. Your father never had such spine. Another pause. But here's the thing, Mr. Vale. I don't lose. I adapt. You took Ryan from me. Cost me 20 soldiers. Embarrassed me in front of the entire city. His voice dropped to something cold and intimate. I'll take something from you. The line went dead. Dominic immediately dialed Marcus. Double the guards at the safe house. Castellano is planning something. Already on it, Marcus replied. She's got 4 men on rotation. No one gets in without. A crash echoed through the phone. Shouting. Gunfire. Then silence. Marcus? Marcus. Nothing. That evening, the video arrived. Elena sat bound to a metal chair in what looked like an abandoned warehouse. Duct tape covered her mouth. Her hair had come loose from its bun, falling across her face. Bruises darkened her cheekbone. But her eyes were what stopped Dominic's heart. Not pleading, not broken. Alert, calculating. Castellano's voice narrated over the footage. I know who she is to you now, Vale. The press is calling her your mysterious associate. They're speculating about romance. How touching. The camera zoomed in on Elena's face. Come to Pier 47. Alone. Midnight. No weapons. No backup. Or I'll send her back to you in pieces. Starting with her fingers. The video ended. Dominic played it again. And again. 10 times. 20. His men urged caution. It was obviously a trap. Castellano would have snipers on every rooftop. Walking in alone was suicide. But Dominic wasn't watching the video for Castellano's threats. He was watching Elena. On the 15th viewing, he saw it. Her eyes, blinking in a deliberate pattern, too rhythmic to be natural, too consistent to be fear. Morse code. He had taught it to his soldiers years ago. Basic communication when voices couldn't be trusted. Long blink, short, 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 T, short, long, R, short, long, A, short, long, long, short, P, TRAP. She was warning him. Even bound and gagged and beaten, Elena was still fighting, still thinking, still protecting him. Dominic set down the phone. Get me Marcus, he said quietly. We need a plan. Marcus slammed his fist on the table. It's suicide, Dom. Pier 47 is Castellano territory. Has been for 30 years. He'll have snipers on every rooftop, men in every shadow. You walk in there alone, you're walking into a grave. He has Elena. She's one person. Marcus leaned forward, his voice urgent. You're the head of a family, an empire. If you die, everything falls apart. Everything we just fought for disappears. Dominic met his oldest friend's eyes. If I abandon her, I'm already dead. Everything I built means nothing. Marcus opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. He had known Dominic for 30 years. He recognized that look, the look of a man who had already made his decision. She knew it was a trap. Dominic continued quietly. She was bound, gagged, beaten, and instead of crying for help, she sent me a warning. Morse code through her blinks. He stood and walked to the window. She's counting on me to be smarter than Castellano. She believes I'll come with a plan, not just a death wish. He turned back to Marcus. I won't disappoint her. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Marcus exhaled. What do you need? 15 minutes. That's all. The plan took shape over the next 2 hours. Dominic would arrive at Pier 47 exactly as Castellano demanded. Alone. Apparently unarmed. the perfect target. Meanwhile, Marcus's men would approach from the water, boats running dark, divers coming up beneath the pier itself. Their objective: neutralize Castellano's snipers before the confrontation reached its climax. 15 minutes? Dominic repeated. Keep them busy for 15 minutes. That's all I need to get her out. Marcus nodded slowly. And if you can't get her out in 15, Dominic's jaw tightened. Then you blow the whole pier. Send Castellano to hell. He paused. With me if necessary. Marcus stared at him for a long moment. They had grown up together on these streets, fought together, bled together. They knew each other better than brothers. No more words were needed. Marcus simply nodded. Dominic prepared in silence, a Kevlar vest beneath a fresh black suit. The fabric hid the bulk well. A ceramic knife strapped inside his boot, invisible to metal detectors. A wireless earpiece, nearly undetectable, connecting him to Marcus's team. And in his pocket, a single bullet. Not for Castellano, just in case. At 11:30, he stood alone in the warehouse, watching Elena's video one final time. Her eyes stared back at him through the screen, calm despite the bruises, steady despite the fear, trusting despite everything. He remembered her words from that night in the safe house, her voice soft in the darkness. Some of us were counting the days we could prove our loyalty. She had proven hers 100 times over. In the dark hallway of his home, in the tunnel beneath the estate. In every silent moment she had watched over him without his knowledge. Now it was his turn. Dominic pocketed his phone and checked his watch. 11:45. I'm coming, Elena, he said to the empty room. And when this is over, I'm promoting you. No more housekeeping, no more invisible. He walked to the door, paused, and looked back at Marcus. If I don't make it out, you'll make it out, Marcus interrupted. You're too stubborn to die. Dominic almost smiled. Then he stepped into the night, and the darkness swallowed him whole. The warehouse reeked of salt, rotting fish, and old blood. Pier 47 had been Castellano territory for 3 decades, a graveyard for those who crossed him. The wooden structure groaned with each gust of wind off the harbor, its boards warped and splitting from years of neglect. Dominic walked through the main entrance, with his hands raised. Spotlights blazed to life, blinding him momentarily. When his vision cleared, he counted at least 20 men, all armed, all pointing their weapons directly at his chest. Click, click, click. The sound of safeties disengaging echoed through the cavernous space. Mr. Vale. The voice came from the shadows at the far end of the warehouse. Salvatore Castellano stepped into the light, flanked by 2 bodyguards the size of refrigerators. 55 years old. Silver hair slicked back, eyes like frozen granite. He wore a suit that cost more than most people's cars, and held a Cuban cigar between manicured fingers. Behind him, Elena sat bound to a metal chair. Fresh bruises marked her face. Duct tape covered her mouth. But her eyes found Dominic's immediately. Alive, alert, waiting, punctual. Castellano continued, drawing on his cigar. I appreciate that in a dead man. I'm hard to kill. Dominic kept his voice steady. Ask Ryan. Oh, wait, you can't. Castellano's expression didn't flicker. Cocky, just like your father. He thought he owned this city too, until my brother put 3 bullets in his chest. And I returned the favor to your brother. Dominic took a slow step forward. Circle of life, Salvatore. I'm tired of circles. Castellano waved his cigar dismissively. I want the whole wheel. He gestured to one of his men, who produced a folder of documents. Here's my offer. Sign over Vale territory to me. All of it. The docks, the routes, the politicians. Everything your family built over 3 generations. He smiled, showing teeth like a shark. Walk away with your life, and I'll let your little maid go. Dominic looked at Elena. She was shaking her head violently. Muffled sounds escaped through the tape. Her eyes were screaming at him to refuse, to fight, to do anything but surrender. You want my life's work for a woman I've known 2 years? Castellano laughed softly. Please, I've seen the way you look at her. That video I sent? Your face when you watched it? He took another drag of his cigar. Don't pretend she's just staff, Vale. We both know better. Dominic's jaw clenched. Castellano was right, and they both knew it. But Dominic also knew something Castellano didn't. 13 minutes had passed since he entered the warehouse. Marcus's team should be in position by now. He just needed 2 more minutes. Let me think about it, Dominic said, stalling. That's a lot of territory to sign away. You have 30 seconds. 15 minutes. I want guarantees. How do I know you'll let her go? 20 seconds. Dominic's earpiece crackled. Almost imperceptibly, The signal. Behind Castellano, Elena moved. She had been working at her bonds since they brought her here. Survival skills learned in shipping containers 5 years ago, dislocating a thumb to slip through tight restraints. Ignoring the pain, her hands came free. When Castellano turned to check his watch, Elena threw herself sideways. The chair toppled. She rolled, putting a stack of crates between herself and the gunman. What the? The world exploded. Smoke bombs detonated from the water side of the pier. Glass shattered as Marcus's divers came up through the floor grates. Sniper shots cracked from outside, but they were met with return fire. Marcus's men had neutralized the rooftop positions. Firefight erupted. Dominic didn't hesitate. He dove toward Elena, sliding across the wet concrete as bullets tore through the air above him. He reached her position behind the crates, covering her body with his own. "I've got you," he breathed, wrapping his arms around her. "I've got you." The warehouse became a war zone. Bullets tore through wooden crates. Muzzle flashes strobed through the smoke. Men screamed and fell. Marcus's team poured in from the water side, flanking Castellano's forces in a deadly pincer movement. Dominic pulled Elena deeper behind the shipping container, shielding her from the crossfire. "Can you walk?" Elena ripped the tape from her mouth, wincing at the sting. "I can run." He grabbed a pistol from a fallen guard and checked the magazine. 8 rounds. It would have to be enough. "Stay behind me." They moved through the chaos like ghosts. Dominic led, weapon raised, firing twice at shadows that got too close. Elena followed inches behind, a length of rusted chain wrapped around her fist like brass knuckles. They moved in sync, no hesitation, no wasted motion, as if they had trained together for years instead of days. Through the smoke, Dominic saw him, Castellano. The old man wasn't fighting. That was for his underlings. He was running, moving toward the back of the warehouse where a luxury yacht bobbed at a private dock. His escape route. "Go!" Elena shouted over the gunfire. "I'll cover." She scooped up a fallen rifle, checked the magazine with practiced efficiency, and took position behind a steel pillar. Dominic didn't ask where she had learned to handle weapons. Survival taught everything. He knew that now. He sprinted after Castellano. The wooden pier groaned beneath his feet as he burst out of the warehouse. Salt wind slapped his face. The yacht's engine was already roaring to life. A bodyguard stepped into his path. Massive, armed, Dominic didn't slow down. He ducked under the man's wild swing, drove his fist into the exposed throat, and kept moving as the bodyguard crumpled. The yacht was pulling away from the dock. 3 feet of black water widened between the pier and the boat. Dominic jumped. He hit the deck hard, rolling to absorb the impact. Castellano spun from the helm, a pearl-handled pistol in his weathered hand. He fired. The bullet sang past Dominic's ear. Before Castellano could fire again, Dominic tackled him to the deck. The gun skittered away. They grappled, old man's desperation against younger man's fury. Dominic pinned Castellano to the deck, his forearm pressed against the old man's throat. "You think killing me changes anything?" Castellano wheezed, his silver hair matted with sweat. "There's always another Castellano. This city runs on blood. It always has. Then let's start with yours." Dominic's hand found the fallen pistol. He pressed it against Castellano's forehead. One squeeze. That's all it would take. Justice for 20 years of war. For his father. For Marcus's brother. For everyone this snake had destroyed. But he didn't pull the trigger. Elena's words echoed in his mind, from that night in the safe house. "You looked at me." His father would have pulled the trigger. His father never hesitated, never showed mercy. And his father had died with more enemies than friends, surrounded by people who feared him rather than loved him. Dominic lowered the gun. "No, I'm not giving you a martyr's death." He stood, keeping the weapon trained on Castellano's chest. "You'll live, in a cell, broken, watching everything you built burn from behind bars." Marcus's men swarmed onto the yacht. "Take him," Dominic ordered. "Gift wrap him for the FBI. I have a contact who's been wanting Castellano for 20 years. They dragged the old man away, his curses echoing across the water. Dominic stood alone on the deck. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder, washing away the blood and smoke. He looked back toward the pier. Elena stood at the edge, silhouetted against the burning warehouse. The rifle hung at her side. Her hair was wild. Her face was bruised. She had never looked more beautiful. Their eyes met across the dark water. "It's over," Dominic breathed. 1 week changed everything. The FBI arrested Salvatore Castellano on 47 federal charges: racketeering, murder, human trafficking, drug distribution. The evidence Dominic provided filled 3 filing cabinets and implicated half of West Boston's criminal infrastructure. The Castellano Empire collapsed within days. Captains fled the city or surrendered to authorities. Soldiers scattered like roaches when the lights came on. Properties were seized. Accounts frozen. 3 decades of carefully constructed power, dismantled in 7 days. Marcus claimed the South Docks as agreed. His flag now flew over territory that had been Castellano's for a generation. The deal had cost Dominic a significant portion of his waterfront holdings, but it had bought him something more valuable: survival, and an ally who would never betray him. For the first time in a decade, the Boston underworld knew peace. The Vale estate underwent its own transformation. Workers stripped away every trace of Victoria: her clothes, her photographs, her white lilies that had filled every room with their cloying sweetness. The renovation was thorough and merciless. Elena supervised everything. But she no longer wore the black uniform of a housekeeper. Business suits now, tailored, professional. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders instead of pinned back in a servant's bun. When she spoke, captains listened. No one questioned her presence at meetings. No one dared. One evening, Dominic called her into his office. "I have a proposition." Elena stood before his desk, hands clasped in front of her. "Old habits." "Sir." "Stop calling me sir." Dominic gestured to the chair across from him. "And stop standing like you're waiting for orders. Sit." She hesitated, then sat. Dominic leaned forward. "Ryan's position is open. I need someone I trust absolutely. Someone who sees what others miss. Someone who's proven they'll stand with me when everything falls apart." Elena's eyes widened slightly. "You want me to be your underboss? I want you to be my partner." He held her gaze. "In all things." Silence stretched between them. "I clean houses, Mr. Vale." She stopped herself. "Dominic, I don't run operations. I don't manage soldiers. I don't negotiate with other families. You hacked a security system in under 2 minutes. You outran a professional hit squad. You survived capture and torture without breaking. You shot 3 men on that pier." Dominic stood. "You're more qualified than Ryan ever was. The difference is, you're actually loyal." Elena looked down at her hands. The bruises from her captivity had faded to yellow shadows. "I have conditions. Name them. No more lilies." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "Ever?" Dominic laughed. The first real laugh he'd managed in weeks. It felt strange in his chest. Unfamiliar. Good. Done. Second. Her eyes met his. "No lies. Not to me. Not ever. If you're walking into danger, I need to know. If something threatens us, I need to know. Complete honesty." "Agreed. And third." She stood and stepped closer. Close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes. Close enough to count her heartbeats. "You call me by my name. Not the housekeeper. Not the girl. Not the maid. Elena." Dominic rose from his chair. "Elena," he said, testing the weight of it on his tongue. How had he gone 2 years without really saying her name? He extended his hand. "Partner." She took it. Her grip was firm. Certain. Partner. The Vale estate had never looked like this. White orchids replaced the lilies. Modern chandeliers cast warm light instead of cold shadows. The walls displayed contemporary art instead of dusty portraits of dead ancestors. Every trace of the old regime had been erased. The charity gala drew 300 of Boston's most influential faces. Politicians who had survived the Castellano fallout. Business leaders seeking new alliances. Society figures desperate to be seen at the event of the season. Dominic moved through the crowd with an ease he hadn't felt in years. The paranoia had faded. The constant surveillance of every shadow, every face, every potential threat. He still noticed everything, but the weight had lifted. He shook hands with a senator, smiled at a judge, made small talk with a tech billionaire who wanted to discuss investment opportunities, but his eyes kept searching the room. A reporter intercepted him near the champagne fountain. "Mr. Vale, the press is calling your associate the Shadow. Can you comment on her role in your organization? She handles operations." Dominic's voice was smooth and practiced. "I handle publicity. Some say she's more than an associate. There are rumors of a romantic Miss Cross." The reporter's attention snapped away. Elena descended the grand staircase. She wore an emerald green gown that flowed like water over her curves. Her dark hair cascaded in soft waves over bare shoulders, and at her throat, diamonds glittered. The choker from Miami, the one Dominic had bought for Victoria all those months ago. It had found its rightful owner, but it wasn't the dress or the diamonds that commanded attention. It was the way she carried herself, the posture of a queen, the gaze of someone who had walked through fire and emerged stronger. "Miss Cross," the reporter practically lunged toward her. What exactly is your role in the Vale organization? Elena smiled. Small, sharp, dangerous. I handle the cleaning, she said. I make sure everything is spotless. She slipped her arm through Dominic's before the reporter could ask another question. They shared a look. A private language developed over 6 months of partnership, of late nights and early mornings, of battles fought and won together. The reporter scribbled furiously, completely confused. Marcus appeared beside them, champagne flute in hand. You two are disgusting, he said, but effective. Castellano's trial starts next month. Prosecutor says life sentence minimum. Good. Dominic's jaw tightened. Let him rot. And Victoria? Marcus asked. Elena's smile sharpened. Last I heard, she's working as a cocktail waitress in Atlantic City, living in a studio apartment. No designer clothes, no diamonds. She touched the choker at her throat. Karma has quite the sense of humor. Later, when the crowd had thinned, Dominic led Elena onto the balcony. The Boston skyline spread before them, glittering against the dark sky. A light rain had begun to fall, just like that first night. Regrets? Dominic asked quietly. Elena considered the question. The rain misted her face, catching the light like scattered diamonds. One, she said finally. I should have saved your life sooner. Dominic turned to face her. You saved it exactly when it needed saving. He covered her hand with his, her fingers intertwined with his automatically, naturally, as if they had always belonged there. Thank you, he said, for not running when you could have. Elena looked up at him. Rain caught in her lashes. Thank you for being worth staying for. The last guests departed after midnight. The caterers packed away crystal and china. The musicians loaded their instruments. One by one, the lights dimmed, until only the security monitors glowed in Dominic's office. A new ritual had emerged over 6 months. Every evening, after business concluded, Dominic and Elena reviewed the day's footage together. Every face catalogued, every anomaly noted. Trust had been rebuilt through vigilance. Tonight should have been celebration. The gala was a success. Their enemies were destroyed. Peace reigned. But something felt wrong. Elena leaned forward, her eyes narrowing at the screen. Wait, rewind that. Dominic scrolled back through the footage. The main hall, guests mingling, champagne flowing. There, Elena pointed. Stop. A woman in black, elegant, unremarkable at first glance. A wide-brimmed hat obscured half her face. She stood near the edge of the crowd, holding a champagne flute she never drank from. I've seen her before, Elena said slowly. At the pier. The night we took Castellano, she was with his group, but she didn't fight, didn't run either, just watched. Dominic zoomed in. The angle was wrong, the resolution too low, but something about the woman's posture triggered recognition. She's not random muscle, Elena continued. Look at how she moves. She's not mingling. She's assessing. Assessing what? Everything. The security positions, the exits, the guest list. Elena's voice dropped. Us. Dominic's phone rang. Marcus. Dom. We have a problem. What kind? Castellano just got a visitor in prison. A lawyer. High-end firm. But here's the thing. No one knows who she works for. No client on record. No paper trail. Dominic's hand tightened on the phone, and she left him a message. Guard overheard it. 4 words. Marcus paused. The shadow has company. The line went dead. Elena had gone pale. They're talking about me. Dominic set down the phone, his jaw clenched. Someone's interested in my organization. Specifically in you. Elena stared at the frozen image of the mysterious woman. The organization that trafficked me, she said quietly. I never found out who ran it. After your raid, I assumed they disbanded, scattered, disappeared. What if they didn't? What if they've been watching this whole time? Waiting? Her voice dropped to a whisper. What if me surviving made me interesting to them? Silence hung heavy in the room. Dominic moved closer. His hand found hers. Then we prepare. We've beaten one enemy. We can beat another. This is different. Elena looked up at him. Castellano wanted territory, power, business. These people, she swallowed. These people want me. Whatever I saw, whatever I know, whatever I represent. Let them come. Dominic's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. Last time I faced an enemy, I was alone, surrounded by traitors, counting down the hours until my death. He squeezed her hand. Now I have you, and you have me, and together, we're untouchable. Elena looked at the frozen image on the screen. The woman in black, the new shadow circling their empire. Untouchable, she repeated softly. I like the sound of that. They stood together at the window. The rain had stopped. The Boston skyline glittered beneath a clearing sky. Somewhere in the east, the first hints of dawn approached. But in the shadows between buildings, darkness remained, waiting. 1 year later, everything had changed. The ballroom of the Copley Plaza Hotel overflowed with 500 guests, politicians, business leaders, activists, journalists, all gathered for the inaugural gala of the Vale Cross Foundation, Boston's newest organization dedicated to rescuing victims of human trafficking. Elena stood at the podium, her emerald gown catching the light. The diamond choker sparkled at her throat, but it was her voice that commanded the room. 7 years ago, I was a statistic. The crowd fell silent. I was a victim, a ghost, a girl who lost her name, her identity, her hope. She paused, letting the words settle. I spent 6 months locked in darkness, believing I would die invisible, believing no one would ever know I existed. Her eyes found Dominic in the shadows backstage. But someone saw me. Someone who had every reason to look away, to focus on his own business, to pretend the darkness didn't exist. Her voice strengthened. He looked at me and said 3 words I will never forget. You're safe now. She gripped the podium. I'm standing here today because one person chose to see. One person chose to act. That's what this foundation is about. Seeing the invisible, saving the lost, giving them back their names. The applause began slowly. Then it built. Chairs scraped as 500 people rose to their feet. Standing ovation. Tears streamed down faces throughout the room. Elena stepped down from the stage, her legs trembling beneath her gown. Dominic waited in the wings. You were incredible, he said softly. I almost threw up 3 times. Still incredible. Later, they escaped to the rooftop. Boston spread beneath them, a tapestry of lights against the dark harbor, the same skyline they had fled through 1 year ago. The same city that had nearly killed them both, but they were different people now. I've been thinking about what you said, Dominic murmured. About purpose. What about it? I spent 20 years building an empire of shadows. Fear, control, violence. He looked at his hands. I told myself it was power. But power without purpose is just noise. Elena stepped closer. And now? Now I have you. He turned to face her. And you gave me something better than power. What's that? A reason to stay human. Elena's eyes glistened. The girl you saved 7 years ago. She would never believe this moment was possible. And the man who saved her. Dominic's voice dropped. He didn't know he was saving himself too. The rain began to fall. Soft, gentle, just like that first night. So what happens now? Elena asked. Now we keep building, keep fighting, keep each other honest. Partners? Always. He pulled her close. Their first kiss was soft, certain, earned through fire and blood and trust rebuilt from ashes. Always, she echoed against his lips. They stood together against the Boston skyline, 2 silhouettes in the rain, the shadow and the king, no longer alone, no longer invisible, untouchable. And that, dear friends, is the story of the shadow who stayed. A story about betrayal and redemption, about seeing the invisible and saving the lost, about finding purpose in the darkest moments, and discovering that true power lies not in fear, but in loyalty, in trust, in love. Elena taught us that the deepest debts are not measured in money, but in moments. The moment someone sees you when the world looks away, the moment someone says you're safe when everything screams danger. And Dominic taught us that the strongest empires are not built on fear, but on genuine connection. That sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is simply look, really look, at another human being. So I ask you now, friends, what did you feel watching this story unfold? Have you ever been invisible? Have you ever been the one who chose to see? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to hear from the depths of your hearts. If this story touched you, please subscribe to our channel, hit that like button, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Every day, we bring you stories that move, inspire, and remind us of our shared humanity. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this community. I wish you all good health, happiness, and peace in your daily lives. May you always find the courage to see the invisible and the strength to stay when running would be easier. Goodbye for now, and I will see you in the next video.